Could you share some specific experiences or memorable cases from your work in therapeutics?
Well, I'm thinking back just more recently to last year's therapy intensive that we hold for 7 days. And during those 7 days, there's so many miracles that happen, and it's because of the work and the effort of the teachers, the students, and everybody gathered together for a very special time where we're really focused on the therapeutics for 7 days in a row. And there was one man in his mid-60s, early mid-60s, who's lived with ankylosing spondylitis all his life. And it's an autoimmune condition, genetically passed down, where it's in the family of arthritis, where the tissue around the spine calcifies, and so you get what's called a bamboo spine, which is a characteristic of this condition where the spine is really locked shut. And it can also be in the pelvis. The legs sometimes they're not able to move. And he has a really strong head forward carriage. The neck is totally immobile, and he's a daily practitioner. And even though he's older with this condition, he was a different person by the end of the 7 days. We had a before and after pictures of his postural assessment, and he was upright. It was unbelievable. He was a new person. The face was changed. Of course, he was so happy, so thrilled. We were all thrilled, where he could move his body more freely. It's so nice to have that happen. There were other people there who, people who are working on cancer treatment. There's so many that come to mind, and I feel like it's hard to pick out one particular case right now, and probably I'll think of something later. Just overall, people having migraines and then they don't have migraines, people really being so uncomfortable in their bodies from all different kinds of aches and pains and injuries. But in general, everybody's really so ecstatic leaving, that they have new bodies that they're thriving in, and to have new faces. They don't look like themselves. Their faces relax, they're spread, the skin color changes, the eyes change, there's a glow about them. In general, that's just wonderful to see overall. Recently, let's see, there was also a case of a woman I worked with in India who had fibroids, heavy menstrual bleeding, really hemorrhaging, and put her through the heavy bleeding practice during the period. And she came back the next day and said she was so happy because she slept for the first time and she wasn't in any pain. And these things, it's not like yoga therapy is any magic bullet, any cure. It's helping you to live with what you've been given, and to survive and to thrive with more ease and less discomfort. It's not necessarily a cure. I do know somebody, though, another person who has ankylosing spondylitis, who actually doesn't have the condition anymore. It's still there. If you test her genetically, it's still there. but when you look at the x-rays, there's no more calcification. But she really worked hard. Really worked hard. It's not a magic thing. You know, she really put the effort in, and she's better. Yeah. So I can't, you know, it's hard to, I think part of the problem I'm having is I actually just taught all day, and you know, it was a full day from morning till now in the early evening. And even today, people were happier about what happened with themselves. And, you know, so it's hard to focus on any one case that stands out. A lot of them stand out, but I'm kind of a little bit at a loss to pick one particular case right now. So I'm sorry. You know, there's a lot. Maybe, you know, tomorrow I'll be like, oh, I should have talked about such and so.
Would you be willing to share the title of a book that you return to again and again for insight or inspiration?
I'm not the type of person actually to read books over and over again, because there's so many other books that I have standing waiting. And a lot of times I actually, because I do read a lot of like technical books, or I'm reading research and a lot of scientific studies, I actually like to read a lot of fiction just to relax my mind. And sometimes it's a problem because I might stay up all night because I'm gripped by the book. Like I just read a book by Kate Atkinson called Life After Life. And it's about, it starts when she's a baby and she's born. It's in the early or late 1800s through the World War II. And she's born and she dies. And then she's reborn and she lives. And later she dies and she's reborn and she lives again. It was a fascinating book to me. And it's actually a historical fiction. You know, it takes place during important periods and places like during the London Blitz during World War II, and also even in Berlin and Nazi Germany. And it was a fascinating book to me. So I kind of like to actually get lost in fiction, and then I'll go back to reading some more nonfiction books. But honestly, I don't reread books. Do you reread books? I'm curious.
No, not really. Maybe Light on Yoga is a book that I
Yeah, Light on Yoga is like a daily read,
exactly.
at least. And yeah, so aside from all the yoga books and definitely the Yoga Sutras, yeah, I read those, but that's something else. I like books by Gabor Mate right now. I'm starting to go through The Myth of Normal. He is a physician, a medical doctor, born during World War II in Budapest to Jewish parents. And his parents were taken away, but they survived. I think a grandmother survived. But he had a lot of trauma because his mother gave him up when he was an infant. And then he had more trauma living in post-World War II Budapest, which was very much difficult if you were Jewish living there. So he suffered a lot of trauma that still lives with him. And I've also taken one of his he had a 7-day course that I was really thrilled with, that I took. He had experts from all over the world, and it was fascinating. And then they had a movie, The Myth, it wasn't The Myth of Normal, it was something else, or maybe that's the name of the movie too, but it was something again about trauma and understanding that it's not really the incident. It's not the incident that happened. You know, you got in a car wreck or whatever, let's just take a neutral, bad, you know, happening, and your body really suffered from it. You got whiplash, and maybe there was some emotional trauma with that as well. But it's how your body and your mind respond to that trauma. And that's what you have to look at and deeply progress with. And, you know, I'm fascinated by his work, Gabor Mate. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And you can find him also on the internet. His movie that he has, it's like maybe an hour and a half long movie. That's really amazing. And he works a lot with homeless people, and he's a doctor, and he's 80 right now, and he's still going strong. He works with a lot of people who have addiction, and he works on his own trauma to this very day. You know, from what happened to him in the past, still he's responding to that reaction in his relationships. We're right over the flight path. Mm-hmm. And I also like Atul Gawande's books. Mm-hmm. He has one called Being Mortal, M-O-R-T-A-L. That's really, really wonderful. And he has other books that I'm not recalling the titles right now that really, you know, as a yoga practitioner, as somebody who goes through life like a lot of people trying to be a better person, these are really good books to also light the way, just like yoga does.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Have you ever experienced an injury through your yoga practice? If so, what did the experience teach you both as a practitioner and a teacher?
Of course. Of course. I've had injuries, especially my back, especially my low back. But it's not that the yoga caused the injury. I had an injury. I injured my back outside of yoga. I was ambitiously actually chopping wood with an axe and throwing it. Okay, and then you should never, lesson learned, you should never, this was decades ago, you should never lift a heavy weight and turn the body and throw it, and then I can't move, you know, and that was the start. And another time, along the same time, there was a tree covered with these big vines that I was trying to take down. I was pulling it down, pulling it down, pulling it down. And finally I was like, oops, there goes my back. And another time I was doing construction where I was throwing bricks from a rooftop. Yeah, I'm a little crazy. And I was, even when I do this, I can feel it. I was throwing bricks from the roof, getting down on the ground, and then throwing the bricks again into the garbage. And then also I stained 6,000 linear feet, both sides twice, of these boards. And then it was really bad. And then the bicep ruptured. Okay, so I was in Pune with this thing about to rupture, and I remember I just held on to the ceiling rope to pull myself up and watched my bicep go completely into the elbow. But see, it was the accident that was waiting to happen there. And same thing, and then I had to get it repaired and all this stuff, but the back injury, you know, I used yoga to help, but then there were some times when I overdid it, and I had the problem with the back bends for my back, and I would overdo it, and that was my own fault. And it's lesson learned again and again and again, because the back bends, you really have to organize everything just right so you're not going to push and be aggressive. And so I had the precondition, and then when I'm doing it incorrectly, when I'm not having the chitta prasadanam, the graceful disposition of the consciousness in the pose, being light as cotton fiber and just muscling the back bend, you know, yeah. But then I would use the yoga to heal it. Yeah, so of course I've had these injuries, absolutely. Getting back to my shoulder injury, this has been chronic, and let's see, pre-pandemic, it was really, really irritating me, and it was getting to the point where I couldn't sleep anymore. It was ruining my life, and everything was really, really painful with this arm, but I kept doing the practice stupidly. And I actually went to see 2 surgeons in India and then picked one and then went to him a few times. I was all ready to go into surgery because there were many things wrong with the shoulder. The bicep was ruptured, the supraspinatus was pretty much torn down the middle all the way to the end. The labrum was, of course, a mess, and other things were wrong. And they were gonna cut this and then, you know, put titanium clips and put it to the bone, and they were gonna stitch up the supraspinatus. And so my good friend, Dr. Manoj Nayak, in Pune, he said, no, don't do the surgery. And he put me in shoulder shavasana for 2 months, every day. Bless his heart. He put me in shoulder shavasana, and then I said, oh, but I want to do chakra bandhasana. And he said, do you love chakra bandhasana or do you love your shoulder? Which do you love more? I was like, okay. So I avoided then, you know, everything. You know, I just didn't listen to my own advice that I give to my own students. And then, you know, I really listened to him, and he put me in shoulder shavasana. And I think what happened, you know, I can live with it now. It's still a ruptured bicep, but my supraspinatus is fine. I haven't done an MRI, but I can sleep. I have no pain. I think what happened is when you settle it down, tuck everything into position where it should be, and put weights and quiet everything down and let it rest, I think what happened, this is my theory, is scar tissue is able to form around the tear. And I'm okay. And I'm so happy I didn't do that surgery, because it would have been new problems. You know, it would have maybe helped the pain in one area, but it would have brought new pain. Absolutely. So yes and no. I've just been stupid, but it's things that I've done outside of yoga that I've injured myself, that ultimately I used the yoga to heal. Absolutely used the yoga to heal. And I think it's kind of ironic in a sense that here I am, you know, helping people to help themselves in yoga, and every time somebody, you know, would say, well, I have this problem. Oh yeah, I've had that problem. I've had this problem. I know that problem. It's like, was this, you know, the path I was on is like, was I really like having these conditions and injuries and, you know, troubles in order to help other people, you know? So it was worth it, I guess.
Do you engage in any other disciplines or physical practices that complement your yoga practice?
Everything complements yoga. Yoga is life, life is yoga. Everything I relate to yoga. You know, if I go and watch a beautiful classical ballet, I see all the yoga positions in their movements. Not all of them, of course, but I'm like, oh, that's just like Virabhadrasana 3. Or, you know, I love to watch also modern dance performances, and I just see yoga moves in them. You know, I love tango, and some of it is anti-yoga in a sense, because you have to be more with a forward body carriage, but still I use my yoga. You know, I understand the body, I understand how you're supposed to move things. And I think when I was a beginner, a raw beginner, and I started dancing for the first time at social dances, I remember somebody said to me, oh, I see you have a lot of potential. And I think it's just because I know how to follow an instruction, and that's very yogic. I know how to listen and be present. I can follow instruction, try to do it, let it go if I'm not doing it. And so it relates to everything, I think. Anything I do. It's just, you know, body mechanics. Even if you go bowling, even though it's an asymmetrical sport, how to make it more symmetrical. Yeah, and definitely I like to walk, I like to hike, and you know, to me, these things are also very yogic. Walking is very meditative, and having done the yoga, the body moves more freely. You can exist within your body. You I even used yoga once a long time ago when I trekked in the Nepal Himalayas for 3 weeks, and I was always a slow trekker or hiker in general. I live in flat land and it's zero altitude, and then you're all of a sudden so high up in the mountains. My highest was 5,700 meters, which was amazing, but I only was able to do it because I was so slow. Everybody else got altitude sickness and had to go back down. I was the only one. Actually, I just went on my own to the top. And then one time they sent out a search party for me because I didn't arrive. I was the first to leave and last to arrive because I was so slow, and I was in these boots. My feet were killing me. But I remember, like from yoga, even in the boot, be on the center of the heel, roll to the outer foot, roll to the big toe mound, move the back of the thigh, and I was able to put one foot in front of the other because of yoga. Yoga helps you survive when you're in not good situations, So yes, definitely yoga, when you're a yoga practitioner, it expands to every activity.
You have been visiting the Institute for many years and have witnessed the evolution of Iyengar yoga firsthand. From your perspective, how do you see the method continuing to evolve in the years to come, both in India and globally?
Oh, that's a real loaded question. I've told this story many times, but it's worth telling it again. Towards the end of Guruji's life, the year before he died, his health really dropped down. I really thought, this is it. I want to go to India and I want to ask him, what are we going to do when you're no more? And I talked to Patricia Walden about this. She said, I'll go with you. And we were there. We were only there for a week. He was surprised to see us. It was a surprise. We asked him for an interview on Sunday when nobody else would be there. We really wanted this private session. And I crafted the question, carefully, so that it's not like, what are we gonna do when you're no more? That's not the way to ask it. I don't remember how I asked it, but he proceeded to tell his life story. And his life story continued for an hour and a half. And I've read many times different biographies. He even asked me once to write about his life story for a publication that I interspersed with a current interview. I know his life story. And each time, though, it's told a little different. So even this time, there were some nuances, different things I hadn't heard before, or paid more attention to things that were like amazing about his life. But the interview was going on and on and on, and we weren't getting an answer to our question. And Patricia and I are giving eyes and looking like, what are we going to do? And actually, finally, I kind of put my hand down on the table. And I was like, Guruji, what are we going to do when you're no more? And he stopped, and he was a little bit surprised. And then that was over quickly, and he said, at some point, Iyengar yoga will be no more. Iyengar yoga will die out. It'll go for a little while, but it won't be at some point. It will die out. And he said, what you have to do is when you practice with integrity. When you teach, observe your students. That was his answer. And I realized later, when I was listening to the interview, because I thought, let me transcribe it and write it all up. No, I ended up not doing it. I just maybe wrote about this story in general, but when I was listening to everything, I was like, his life story was the answer to that question, about what would happen to Iyengar yoga. But his life story was, he overcame so many obstacles. And no matter what, he loved yoga. And he was going to practice, and he wanted the world to share in his joy of his love of yoga. He was a bhakti yogi. He loved the yoga. He loved the art, the science, the philosophy of it. And at one point, one of the stories is when he was teaching in Ferguson College, some people burned the room down that he taught yoga in there. It burned down. They burned it. He had no more yoga to teach. Imagine somebody coming to your studio and setting it on fire, how you would feel. And he had no money. You know, we're protected with insurance and all this. Maybe we would be like, okay, I give up. No, he did not give up. He had people against him, and he still got on his mat. Well, there wasn't a mat back then, but he still got on his feet. He put one foot in front of the other, and he practiced, and he still taught, no matter what. And that's the message for everyone about Iyengar yoga. Doesn't matter what I saw from the beginning to now. It's Guruji's gift to us, and it's going to live on in some way, shape, or form, even though maybe there won't be Iyengar yoga anymore. To me, all the schools of other yogas, all the schools of yoga, they're all doing Iyengar yoga, even though they don't know it. Early on, I remember, very early on, we were teased about our Iyengar yoga practice because we really focused on standing poses a lot. And the other yogas didn't do standing poses. And then it came to be that, yes, they ended up doing standing poses too. And people even, you know, give other names for their schools, like Hatha Yoga Alignment. Everybody knows that's like, well, we do Iyengar yoga, but we're not certified. We don't want to do that. We're going to do our own thing. So everybody is doing Iyengar yoga, whether they know it or not. And so it's Guruji's study, his philosophy, his teaching, his work to bring Iyengar yoga to the teeming masses of people has really stuck. It's really stuck. There were other waves. There was, you know, Vivekananda coming to the States. It didn't spread like Guruji had spread it. And Guruji worked hard. You know, all the demonstrations he gave, he worked so hard to show what yoga is. And he wasn't respected in India at first. You know, he had to go to the West to get attention about the yoga. One time I had an Indian student who was getting a Ph.D. at where I live. It's a university town. He went back to India, and he wrote a story about me because he had friends asking him, where'd you learn that yoga? And he said, well, from a woman in the States. And there he was Indian. And it's like, he had to go all the way to the States to learn yoga. And now even India, it's finally got popular. It's gotten popular. And to me, it's all because of Iyengar. B.K.S. Iyengar, our Guruji. So it will carry on. Maybe it will die out, Iyengar yoga, but it's still going to be there. We're going to get on our mat, we're going to practice, and when we teach, we're going to really see our students. It's going to carry on. And Abhijata is wonderful to carry that torch. So it's going to burn even longer, I think. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And the last. When your name is mentioned, most people immediately associate you with your extensive work in the field of yoga therapeutics. How did your journey into this area begin? And what drew you so deeply to continue exploring and dedicating yourself to this path?
I think a lot of people who help other people have had an experience early in life that really was traumatic, and somehow they were, you know, there's even research on children who are resilient they call it. What's the difference? Why do these children who grow up in similar circumstances, some fail and some don't? They're resilient children, they call them. And I would say my brothers and we're surprised we made it to where we are today, actually. Like we every now and then when we talk, you know, it's like, can you believe we survived? And I don't think it's a mere coincidence that I went into a helping profession. Before yoga teaching became a profession in and of itself, we all, us, you know, the older generation of teachers, we never knew yoga as a profession. We all had jobs, real jobs. And, but our passion was yoga, really. And so I was in a helping profession. I was, you know, I worked with emotionally disturbed children for 5 years, and you know, really intense in a locked facility. And so, and I always taught yoga before that, during that, and I continued. And so when I learned about Iyengar yoga and was reading the book Light on Yoga before I knew Guruji was even alive, I was interested in these beneficial effects in Light on Yoga. It's like, wow, look at this. You can practice and help yourself. You can help other people too. And then when I would go to Ann Arbor, Michigan to study with the first generation of teachers, I saw they were doing stuff to help people with the poses. And I was struck by this. And from a very early moment when I, you know, had Light on Yoga, knew he was a real living being, heard he had a center in Pune, I wanted to go there. And I really wanted to study yoga. And I really wanted to help in the medical class and learn to help people. It was from day one. But again, that was just always part of yoga. It's in Light on Yoga. A lot of us come to yoga. I actually came to yoga because I wanted to be flexible, because I'm very stiff. Guruji one time, many times actually, would yell at me and say, I'm not going to teach you anymore. You're too stiff. And I wanted to be flexible. That was my condition at the time, in my mind. And, you know, I don't know anybody who comes to yoga because they want to study yoga for the sake of yoga. Usually you come for another reason, and it changes, it evolves, and then it's like, ooh, I want to go deep in. I want to dive deep and really learn about this beautiful art, science, philosophy. And yeah, so it was from day one. Yeah, and I was lucky that I got to Pune at an early age and was able to stay there for a year, working in those, studying in the classes, being in the back of the general classes that I would learn to assist in. So every day I was learning to help people. So it comes in your hands. It takes a long time. It takes a long time. You know, you can't just pick it up, go, you know, take some notes, go watch the medical class, take some notes, and see you know something. I still know nothing, you know, but I'm willing to learn and keep learning. I still go back. I still want to learn.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.